Hello everybody and welcome to Chrysalis on the Couch. So my name is Lorna and today we will be talking around a general theme of social justice and therapy, or therapy and social justice. So that topic of course means different things to different people perhaps, but I'm very pleased today to be joined by Martin, Anna and Simon. And, you know, if you are enjoying our Chrysalis on the Couch episodes, then do please remember to press like and to subscribe to our channel. And we look forward to hearing from you and you viewing our channel in the future. So I'm just going to I'd ask everybody to just introduce yourselves quickly and then we'll just get started, shall we? Martin, do you want to start?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Martin. I'm one of the Chrysalis tutors. I'm now tutoring on the year 1, 2 and 3 courses. And I'm also participating as a student in the level 6 research diploma as well, which is just great at the moment. Deadline's in a couple of weeks, so things are a little bit stressful to say the least. The reason I'm here is because I'm pretty passionate about social justice. I'm a gay man myself. You know, I've had my own fair share of prejudice in many ways. I've been through my own process of therapy. I work with a lot of students and have worked in education for 25 years. And I've worked a lot with people who are trans, gay, BAME, have disabilities. So I kind of like hear a lot of stories about social justice, about identities, and about people's traumas and experiences. And I think it's just a really humbling process to go through that with not just friends and family, but also with my clients and my students as well. So that's a little bit about why I'm here. So thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I'm sure we'll come back to some of those points that you just mentioned there for sure. So Anna.
Hello everyone, my name's Anna and I'm a year 2 student just finishing up second year. In my day job I work as a university lecturer in the arts, and the subject I research has some connections to issues of social justice, so that's what drew me to this evening's subject.
Great, thank you, Anna. And over to you, Simon.
Hello, well, I don't need to introduce myself because you just have. I work on year 3 of the course, 3-year course, and I work in the school during the day. One of my reasons that this topic attracted me was that my school is a special school for learning difficulties and kids with trauma, and so accommodating that need is very interesting from a teacher's perspective, because we're just getting into addressing the issues that we really need to, and they're similar to the issues in the therapy room. So I look forward to exploring.
Great, thank you so much for that, Simon. Yes, and I'm Lorna Cordwell. I'm also a tutor at Chrysalis. There have been for some time, and I also have a private practice where I see clients for lots of different reasons. My interest in this topic was really, noting some of the history of, the connections between therapy and what we're calling social justice, and how, I think that relationship can be fairly mixed, really. But, sometimes we might feel that therapy can go in a direction of, just confirming what people might not be best for them. So, therapy for, getting people back to work quickly, therapy, that is, expecting results very quickly and so on. But historically, there's been a strong connection between therapy and social justice issues. So even going back to Freud and his contemporaries like Adler and Reich, for example, who did an awful lot of work in helping soldiers returning from the First World War to receive humane treatment after they were traumatized. Rogers, I'm sure most of us realize, had done a lot of work in relation to social issues. And again, has worked with with various organisations to alleviate social conflict and so on. And then there's lots of charities that have grown up really as as a response to a need. So charities like the Samaritans, for example, that started from one man with a telephone line. Charities such as Cruise that started, in somebody's living room, identifying a need in the community and doing what we can do best, in other words, using our therapy skills to actually sort of, support that need. But I know that everybody has, lots to say. Anna, can I come to you first of all? And and just ask you a little bit more about your work.
Yeah, sure. So I've done research really around museums and about who participates in visiting museums and who doesn't. And some of my research has focused on what's called the deficit model, which is an understanding of museum audiences as being deficient in something, that museums are helping to top up by them visiting. And I work with school-age children and explored lots of reasons why they visit museums with schools, what they get out of their visit, etc. And it's really made me, I guess, think about some transferable subjects to therapy and counselling practice. Particularly in terms of what barriers there might be for clients accessing counselling services and how that might connect to issues of social justice, but also what barriers there might be for somebody who wishes to become a counsellor, for example. And can they? Are the courses set up in such a way that's accessible and inclusive for them? I'm thinking in particular about some courses you need to have your own counselling, and that's specified as part of the course. And I don't think that is with Chrysalis, or it's not a completely a requirement. That's and correct. That might, although it's recommended, I'm sure, and that might actually be a barrier. If somebody can't afford to have their own counselling, that might actually stop a range of people from entering training.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. Martin, in your experience as a tutor, first of all, have you found that people have discussed a barrier in relation to paying for personal therapy?
Yeah, I think I had a conversation recently. I mean, in regards to kind of like enrolling on training, therapist training, there were a number of courses that did require the personal counselling as part of that, and that some students did feel barred from following their dream, and it wasn't until they came across Chrysalis that they felt they could train to become a therapist, to become a counsellor. And yet, ironically enough, all those students are doing so much self-development work anyway, not just through their own will, but through the structure of the course itself, through the assignments and the self-reflection and the learning journals and so on. So I think as people who want to become counsellors, there are barriers there. And also in terms of people who would like counselling therapy, there are plenty of barriers, especially in regards to their own fears around their own vulnerability, especially if they've had trauma related to social justice issues like racism or homophobia. And I think some people want to have therapy with people who've got a similar identity as them.
Yeah.
And I think this is because there's so much politicization of identity now, and so much negative politics around certain identities, that people kind of like fear talking to other people. They feel more comforted, I think, with social media, and that they've got access to similar and like-minded people. But I think it is difficult finding therapists who kind of like promote their own identities to make people feel welcome and comfortable. So in that regards, I think there are definitely barriers.
Yeah, I think that that's such an important point, such an important point. What's your thoughts, Simon?
Well, I was just thinking, particularly now with prices going up, it does, there is a barrier. And as Martin says, you can gain so much. I mean, I gained so much from doing our skills practice in years 1 and 2. You know, year 1 hypnotherapy, but year 2 with one-to-one. I mean, that was a therapy in itself. I mean, the course, everything that we're saying about the course being reflective fills that gap. When of course it's free, and being online, it's even more convenient for people who don't have transport access or, you know, the money to pay for it. And so in one way, it's, you know, online counselling is great for them, but as we were chatting earlier about the value of actually being there.
Yeah.
There is much more valuable. I mean, I counsel in online and one-to-one, and it's very vivid, the difference. Even though you're quiet in your rooms, but you're not sharing the same space, and it's that thing which is lost.
Yeah, indeed. But it's not just the cost of personal counselling, is it? And you're quite right, Anna, that actually, you know, Chrysalis does not require personal counselling on the course, but you know, would often recommend it. So, you know, I often recommend it to students, but you know, with the condition that, you know, do this at the time that feels right for you. You know, it's great to, you know, it's great to, you know, walk your talk, if you like, but at the same time, you know, that the value of personal counselling is completely lost if we feel forced to do it when we're not ready for it and we don't really have anything to reflect on. So, but that's not the only thing, is it? And, you know, Martin, if I can come back to you, it's, you know, there are other barriers, aren't there? There are other barriers to, you know, to the world of therapy, if you like. So, you know, we know, for example, that, you know, despite efforts, I won't say best efforts, that would be pushing it too far, I think, but despite efforts to make, you know, therapy training and the therapy profession much more inclusive, it is still, you know, very much considered to be a white middle class profession, and, you know, interestingly, a white female middle class profession. I mean, it's still relatively rare to have a mix of, you know, more than, you know, 2 or 3 men, you know, in any of our counselling groups. And it's really encouraging, Martin, to hear that, you know, that you find that the groups that you're teaching, you know, are much more inclusive. Are you finding that has changed and become so?
I think it very much depends on the cohorts as well, and maybe the areas. But one of the things I've noticed is that in some of my groups, I'm the only male there. And in other groups, there might be 3, 4, 5 of us. And I think, you know, I was reading articles long before when I was training, actually. And one of the issues came up was gender. And I think one of the barriers for men coming into the therapist profession is definitely the finances. Not in terms of the affordability of the courses, that's not a problem. It's actually the ability of earning an income once you are qualified and getting a position. Because one of the really frustrating things I found, and this is a really big social justice issue, I think, for counsellors, is that you end up having to put a huge amount of your own money and time and resources, and also a lot of voluntary placements, which basically keeps a lot of the charities going. You know, if it wasn't for people training as therapists, they wouldn't be able to offer their services, because I would say the majority of the work that's available on placements is actually done by students. And I think this was one of the big things for the professional associations to attend to. And that was, you know, offering much better opportunities and career pathways for counsellors, because they, and I would say this from my own cohorts, you know, there are some fantastic therapists being produced and in process of graduation from Chrysalis, because the reasons they're doing this job are really kind of selfless and giving and generous. And I think I can really put my hand on my heart and say all my students are doing it for the highest possible reasons. You know, they have so much integrity. And I think that's because of their own social injustice issues that have happened to them. They've used it to make them stronger people. And they'll do really well to help others do the same. But I think, you know, there are, you know, I didn't realise until we started talking that, yeah, the barriers are there for counsellors, you know. And I think there's a lot of work to be done through the professional associations, government, funding, charities, is that we need to look after our counsellors, because there's going to be a lot of mopping up to do, I think, over the next few decades, particularly with a lot of the social justice issues and social media, cost of living, you know, the effects of the pandemic on children's mental health and educational opportunities. I think there's going to be a greater and greater need for it, and I'm afraid we're not really coming at this from a preventative measure. You know, counsellors are going to have to be there to help people when they come out the other side with depression and anxiety and PTSD and maybe worse conditions.
Yes, and it feels like, you know, a real sort of swimming against a very strong tide, doesn't it? So, you know, as you're talking there, I'm sort of thinking, you know, just in terms of, you know, the type of charities that really feel maybe that they're pushing against the tide. So, you know, charities like gambling charities, for example, where, you know, gambling has, you know, massively increased as a social problem in, you know, in our country, and you know, there is very little help for it, very little help, and you know, and since internet gambling, you know, has become really popular, and regulations relaxed, then, you know, there's so many more people who have massive issues with gambling, and, you know, very little support, while organisations are, you know, making a lot of money from people's misery. And, you know, so, but then, you know, those organisations are offering counselling, but they're offering other sort of, you know, other types of help as well. And I think that, you know, we have to recognise where our help is best given, and where it fits in with other things. But it still feels to me like, you know, we can be really pushing against something that is very powerful and very difficult to actually overcome. So Simon, Anna, you are both involved in education as well as training in counselling. How do you feel, you know, working with the young people who you're working with?
Well, I mean, I work with undergraduates and postgraduate students, and the way that we think about social justice in teaching is through lots of different ways, lots of different threads. A big one at the moment is thinking about the theoretical foundations of the courses that we're teaching, and applying that back to therapy. You could say that a lot of the foundations of how therapy is taught to students is Eurocentric, Western, androcentric theories and models. And maybe one way of that counselling could open itself up more to social justice is through engaging with other kinds of theories about the self and etc.
Yeah, totally. That's a whole new interesting conversation, isn't it? So, well, so the nature of helping, it's like, well, when is our help wanted and asked for, and when is it the wrong type of help? And we can make an assumption that our way of helping is useful for everybody, and perhaps it isn't. Perhaps it really isn't. And the idea, I mean, just the simple idea of, well, one person being in a room with another person and discussing in confidence something could be so very different for lots of cultures around the world. It's like, well, if I have a problem, I take that to my family, my church, my community. We work it out together. There is none of this sort of sitting in a quiet room with a stranger. There can be a whole different belief system there. And and of course, counselling, what can be secular, it can be part of a faith, it can be in various different directions, but perhaps we're still missing some tricks there that would be really, really important. What do you think, Simon? Do you
well, we have a lot of students who are referred from mainstream. So in mainstream, the average class size is probably around 30, but our largest class size is 10. My class is 6, but it feels like 26 some days because of the type of kids, because they're either very autistic or dyslexic, or they have trauma which flares up every now and again, and we have to accommodate that in our therapeutic approach. So by way of analogy, you were mentioning different cultures have different ways of coping with things. In a way, our school helps to cope with the problems that mainstream have by taking their kids out and giving them a chance because of their learning difficulties based on whatever. And in the same way, that we might come across a minority community which doesn't embrace talking one-to-one in a room. But then again, in order to offer the help to those people, there are other ways of doing it to help the helpers, because they might find that they're closed, their sort of community way of doing things doesn't work, and so they may embrace help from the outside. And just one other thing, going back to what Martin was saying about affordability, I couldn't afford to be here unless I was able to pay monthly and that I was working full time.
Right.
And it's a great course. It's a great course.
Yeah, good point. So where are we? There was just one other thread that I just wanted to sort of pick up in terms of therapy and social justice, is that obviously we are bound by codes of ethics which are really important, and I'm just wondering how we feel about where sort of where political action, for example, sits with therapy generally, sits with therapists, over, well, I mean, I think we can go back to any time period and find that, somebody is pressing for much needed change in a certain direction, and we know over the past few years, there has been sort of massive pushes for change in directions that people really, really need, whether that is tackling homophobia or racism, domestic violence issues, lots of different directions. I think sometimes therapy can sort of, it can feel as if therapy just sort of, sits sort of quietly on the fence there. But there are definitely organisations that are, that are out there, sort of, pushing for change, as well as doing our bit as therapists. And I wonder how we feel about that. The idea that, well, we're bound by a code of ethics to not bring the profession into disrepute, but would we get arrested for a cause?
Well, the argument to say that if we did get arrested for a cause, we wouldn't be able to do what we do because we'd be arrested.
Well, hopefully let out afterwards, Simon. So,
well, yes, yeah, but if you keep on doing it, then you might get put away for longer and longer. I don't know. It depends. I mean, as soon as you said politics, because I'm not a very political person, and I think it's a lot of nonsense. It's necessary nonsense, but in terms of therapy, as soon as you start talking politics, it's lost. I mean, in the therapy room.
Totally, I totally agree, and that very, very strong notion that we must work with the client who we have in the room. It's not for us to push our beliefs onto any client. That's absolutely clear. But perhaps there are certainly therapy groups who are involved in social change as well as being therapists, and who will lobby and who will protest and who will petition and so on and so on. Not necessarily getting arrested, but in support of their clients, in support of our clients. It's like, okay, well, how many clients do I have to see who are clearly traumatized because of what is happening to them in their society, before I start thinking, well, maybe I should also be pushing a little bit. Or a lot, depending on how we're feeling about things, towards, being part of that change, or at least adding my voice to that change.
I kind of think from my own experience of working with social justice issues and people who've been severely affected by social issues like racism or homophobia or transphobia or even things like rape and sexual abuse, where I did my final placement with Chrysalis, is that there's nothing more powerful than sitting in the room with somebody who actually wants to listen to your story. And I think, politics just falls aside from all of that. It's something that's outside. And the thing is with politics is that it brings people together under a cause, which is important. But what's really important and healing for a human being is to actually be heard by somebody and understood. And I think it's those three core conditions of empathy, congruence, and unconditional positive regard that someone can get in a therapy room, but they can't get on a protest. Because the protests are so filled with emotion and identity politics and them and us mentalities. But that's not actually for me as a gay man, that is actually not helpful. I think there comes a point where a cause needs to be pressed in society. I think as a therapist, the biggest change comes in that individual conversation with somebody and listening to their lived experience of what's happened to them and how it's affected them. I think most important of all is that, as individuals, we internalize the social prejudice, we internalize phobias, we internalize prejudice until we think there's actually something wrong with us. And I think for me, it was about a case of turning round to religion and saying, you know, you don't bring people closer to God by telling them there's something wrong with them because they're gay or a woman or black. And I think for me, the most powerful thing in therapy, and actually through my dissertation that I'm doing at the moment, was realizing that the internalized homophobia I was carrying for quite some years was actually placed there by religion. And I could actually turn around and say, no, that's religious dogma, and that is religious homophobia, and that is religious intolerance and religious fundamentalism. And saying, you know, that isn't the way forward. And I extricated that from my own identity, where I became very kind of like feelings of inadequacy and inferiority and hopelessness and depression. And I thought, no, it's not me that's the problem, it's society. And I've internalized that. And I think people who live in racist societies, you know, if they are black or Asian, and they internalize that, you know, they don't feel good. They don't feel that they can contribute. They don't feel valid and valuable and recognized and validated.
Mm-hmm.
And they go through this amazing process of realizing where their own inadequacy comes from, because society thinks they are. And I think the same is true for women and misogyny and abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And political and financial and legal, you know, unfairness and biases and prejudices. You know, equal pay, that's what we want. Equal pay, equal opportunities, equal say, equal representation. They're important, but so too is the individual who needs someone to listen to them. And I think that's what I do when I listen to people talk through their issues, is that they turn around and say, no one's really listened to me like that before. You know, or I never felt really validated by that, what you just said, that actually there's nothing wrong with me.
That's really interesting. Thank you for that, Martin. So because that puts my question that I was asking into I think a really good perspective. I think so often we can actually externalize something, we can push something out, we can project what we need to actually be looking at for ourselves, you know, onto, you know, the issue, and therefore just miss ourselves completely in it, and, you know, just find a sounding board for our anger and so on. Whereas actually what I'm hearing you're saying there is that actually, well, you know, it's not the same as us having to take responsibility for our problems, but it's for us to actually recognize our strength and to find that within us, and to, you know, to actually, you know, to actually realize to love ourselves, and to, you know, to take care of ourselves, and to then feel that, you know, we can express ourselves, and, you know, to ourselves as well as to anybody else. And then, you know, sometimes those other people turn out not to matter to us. It's like, okay, there will always be somebody who doesn't agree with us or doesn't like us or whatever. Who cares? You know, because I like me. So, and yeah, if that starts with somebody else valuing us so that we are in turn beginning to value ourselves, fantastic.
And it also links to what you were saying earlier about therapy being too much about the individual, and to formulate and understand these problems, you need to zoom out. It's, you know, you don't have a problem, it's wider than that. And it links what Anna was saying about the philosophy and the theory behind therapy being, it's not just about the individual, it's about their whole sphere. their social network and what messages they receive, to be able to have this sort of almost integral messages that this is right and this is wrong.
Yeah, so thanks, Simon. We've got a couple of minutes. Anna, do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, if it's okay, just to come back to what Martin said, I think that's right. It's a really difficult subject, isn't it? Because you think therapy is neutral, and apolitical almost, but it isn't. I don't believe that anything is neutral or apolitical. So in terms of what the therapist's role is in supporting social justice, I just keep coming back to this idea that it's about recognizing the unique skills that a therapist can offer. Actually, that's something really really unique. Of following somebody's story, of validating it, and anything more than that is maybe to do with what the therapist feels like they can offer. It might be going out on protests, lobbying organisations, politicians, groups, etc. But maybe we shouldn't lose sight of actually what we bring is some quite powerful tools.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that we need to wrap up our conversation here. So thank you so much, everybody. And for those of you that have been listening, I hope that you found this interesting and inspiring. If you have, then do please remember to like and to subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so already. And there's lots more episodes to come. So, hope to see you again at some point soon in the future. Thank you very much. But for now, goodbye from us.
Bye.